This year, it's all about the new. New decade, new faces, new expectations. And as the Cowboys are on their quest for 6, they got the same dream. Where would this team go? There's no limits to what they can accomplish. So with a fresh perspective and a new direction, the 2020 Dallas Cowboys are determined to find greatness. And it all starts this offseason, right here on the Blitz.
It's time for another edition of the Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report. Bill Jones along with Kyle Youmans in our own respective Academy Sports and Outdoors home studios for the final time this offseason. This football season, Kyle, is getting closer and closer, and I've tried to keep it positive throughout the pandemic. It is going to happen. We need football not only in the fall, we need it in about late July at the Star in Frisco.
I'm in complete agreement there, Bill. We got to get something going, have feet on the ground, boots at the Star. We have coaches there. Let's get players there. Let's start getting some hitting, some pads. Let's figure things out moving into 2020. And we've talked about it all offseason. We need to have an actual season in order to kind of complete the whole circle.
And the NFL has a plan to get those players back to not only the Star in Frisco, but all NFL training facilities. And it's really a three-tiered plan. When the go-ahead comes for players can get back into their practice facilities. Already the coaches are allowed back in. But it's a situation that's going to take place over a month's period of time, it looks like.
Yeah, things are going to look a lot different than you would normally see at the Star. You're going to see those three tiers that includes players, essential personnel that could be around those players, and then those that may not need to be around the players. And that's kind of a transition period that the entire NFL, not just the Dallas Cowboys, are going through, and it's to continue to keep those social distancing practices and keep the health of everyone in mind, whether it's coaches, players, employees, all alike. They want to make sure that everybody's healthy and safe whenever they're going into the workplace, and I think the NFL's done a great job of making sure that these guidelines are outlined in a specific and efficient way to where people can follow those rules and ultimately be safer for it.
And fortunately, the Cowboys have such a large, spacious locker room. They don't have to do much in the way of reconfiguring to keep the proper social distancing, and 15 players in the weight room. All right, let's fast forward to training camp and on into the season. And Kyle, how about your players with the most to prove in 2020? Let's start on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, I think this first one's not necessarily going to surprise a whole lot of people, and it's Trysten Hill. He was a second-year defensive tackle with a little bit more competition around him than even he had last year, because you bring in guys like Gerald McCoy, Dontari Poe, Neville Gallimore, a draft pick from here in 2020, and now you've all of a sudden got a defensive tackle room full of talented tackles that are going to be able to fight for that rotation and fight for those starting spots. But the thing with Trysten Hill, he just has to be present. Whenever you miss 9 games and are inactive and a healthy scratch, you're not doing a whole lot. And yes, he is a late second-round pick. Yes, he was the first selection of the 2019 draft. But you look at some of the other defensive tackles taken behind him. Dramont Jones, 14 games with Denver, 3.5 sacks and an interception. And then Kalen Saunders, 12 games, including 4 starts for the Super Bowl winning Chiefs. So you have some guys taken behind Trysten Hill that ultimately had better rookie seasons.
All right, who's your guy on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, it's Connor Williams, because Connor Williams now also has competition, because it's going to be a 4-man hunt for that center and guard spot. And not only has he kind of given up the certainty of being that starter at the left guard spot, but he's shown that he's had those ACL injuries, that he hasn't necessarily lived up to the second-round expectation that Connor Williams has. He's going into year 3 of his potential NFL career. He's got to show out, because in 2018, he struggled quite a bit at the start of the season. 2019, he showed some life weeks 3 through 5, but really fell off before the ACL injury actually hit. So Connor Williams has to have a magnificent season.
All right, real quick, let me ask you for both a defensive and offensive sleeper to look out for.
So I'll keep this quick because Daryl Worley is my sleeper on the defensive side of the football. And a lot of people are saying, why is it Daryl Worley? Well, he's only 25 years old, so he's not your normal veteran. He's had the majority of his games in the NFL come as starts, and he's also got the flexibility to play both safety and cornerback. I think he's a sleeper to potentially take over a starting job, and we'll talk about the corners coming up later in the show, but I think he's one of the guys that's going to be in that conversation. Then on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's the fullback position, and I'm going to put it undrafted free agent Siwu Olanalua from TCU. Bigger, faster, stronger, and he can catch out of the backfield. I think Olawale, that fullback who's been here for 3 years, has got a little bit of trouble because I think Kellen Moore is going to fall in love with the tools that Olanalua bring to the table.
And certainly some tongue twisters at that fullback position for the Cowboys. But I'm with you on that guy out of TCU. All right, we got much to get to on this edition of the Blitz. When we come back, how about some parallels between this offseason and the offseason that Jerry Jones and the Cowboys went through some 9 years ago? Mickey Spagnola joins us to reflect back when we come back.
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz is brought to you by AT&T. Just okay is not okay. And by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club. This segment is brought to you by AT&T. Just okay is not okay.
Welcome back to the Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report. Bill Jones with Kyle Youmans, and we are now joined by Mickey Spagnola of DallasCowboys.com. And we go back down memory lane, Mickey, a little bit. It says 9 years ago, some parallels between this offseason and 2011, which was, of course, was the lockout year, and the players did not report to training camp. And really, the NFL new year didn't start until August of that year.
Well, I'll tell you what, Bill, the parallels are eerily similar. If you remember back to 2011, the lockout, because the league was trying to negotiate a new CBA with the NFLPA. They couldn't come to agreement, so the owners locked out the players on, of all days, March 11th, pretty similar to when things started happening this year with the coronavirus. And they did not allow the players into the facility. They didn't get any strength and conditioning program in. There was no OTAs, and now, like this year, no mini camps either. So this progressed all the way through the spring and into the summer. And it was like, you know what? They started the season on time, and it was a shotgun start to training camp because they didn't ratify the new CBA until July 25th. They opened the team facilities in 2011 on July 26th. As a matter of fact, 9 a.m. in the morning. And on the 27th, the Cowboys departed for San Antonio to start training camp. They had their first practice on the 28th. And on the 29th, you guys, get this, they were able to start signing players, the rookies, the draft choices, veteran guys. They were able to start signing. So the league year started late. The Cowboys started that first practice, and basically they had walkthroughs for several days before they were able to get in pads. So it looks like we're looking at something very similar now. We don't know when the Cowboys will start training camp because we're not sure if that Pro Football Hall of Game will start or be played. So we'll see there. But you know what? The Cowboys played their first preseason game in 2011 on August 11th, and they also opened the season on time, and it was 9-11 at the New York Jets.
Now, Mickey, you mentioned no OTAs, no mini camp, but with these teams and with these rookies and these players that have been around these virtual meetings, what are the biggest things that they're actually missing by not having either one of those events throughout the offseason?
From the Cowboys' standpoint, they're missing their head coach meeting the entire team, all 90 men in the roster. Everything's been virtual, as you said. Everything's been learned online. But there's nothing like a bunch of coaches being able to actually see these players do something on the field. And that's obviously not going to happen until the start of training camp. And that's exactly what happened in 2011. And Kyle, the other parallels are the Cowboys that year had a new head coach. Now, Jason Garrett was the interim the end of those last 8 games in 2010, but he hadn't taken over the entire team that year, just like Mike McCarthy. The other parallel is the Cowboys had a new defensive coordinator in 2011. Rob Ryan was taken over. Well, Mike Nolan's taken over now, so it's a new defense and a defense that has to improve. So you can do all these meetings and they can get their installations, but there's another thing to get on the field and actually do some of this stuff. And you know, that's what they faced in 2011. Hey, Bill, another parallel, if you could think about this, the Cowboys were they were trying to find a new kicker. Dan Bailey ended up winning the job. They're looking for a new kicker this year.
Yep, and of course they signed Greg Zuerlein, and should be in good hands, and they were in pretty good hands with Dan Bailey back then. All right, Mickey Spagnola, we appreciate you joining us here on The Blitz, and when we come back in just a moment, how about we take a look at some of the top competition once training camp gets underway, especially at the cornerback position.
This segment was brought to you by AT&T. Just okay is not okay.
Welcome back to The Blitz. Bill Jones along with Kyle Youmans, and time to dive into what could be the biggest competition at training camp in 2020. And how about we start at the cornerback position, as, of course, Kyle, the Cowboys lost Byron Jones in free agency. That's a big hole to fill at that cornerback spot. But they do have some candidates, and some are longer in the tooth than others.
And it's definitely wide open, Bill, because when you look at just the amount of depth at the cornerback position, there's legitimately 2 different sets of corners that could start at some point this season. You could go with a lineup of Jordan Lewis or Cheeto Awuzie and Anthony Brown, or you can turn around and you could have a Daryl Worley or a Trayvon Diggs or a Reggie Robinson, and you're going to be fine either way. Even though Byron Jones was lost during the offseason, I think depth-wise on paper, the cornerback position is 1, wide open, but 2, just a lot deeper. And I think that's something that Mike Nolan really wanted to do, was not only make a shift size-wise, but make a shift in terms of having just competing corners that are going to bring that competition, bring an opportunity to start, and you're going to see a couple of those guys do just that. I think there's a chance you see both Reggie Robinson and Trayvon Diggs start multiple games in 2020.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be very interesting. The first day we get a chance to lay eyes on them at the first practice to see where they've got Trayvon Diggs working. Does he work with the ones right off the bat? Do they ease him in because he hasn't had an off season to work with the coaches and the players and so forth? All right, let's switch to offense. And how about the interior of that offensive line? Of course, the big loss, Travis Frederick at center, and that is a huge hole to fill.
It's a huge hole. It's the biggest hole, I think, out of the entire team, question mark-wise, going into the training camp. Because if you look at what Travis Frederick brought to the table, he brought you security not only at center, but also at guard as well. Because right now, with the 4-man competition of what's going to go on at center, that guard spot is either going to be 1, Connor Williams, or 2, the odd man out at the center spot. And you've got those 4 names. I mentioned Connor Williams, but you got Connor McGovern there, second-year, third-round draft pick out of Penn State last year. Joe Looney, who filled in for Travis Frederick in 2018 and has over 1,000 career snaps, most of them as a starter in 2018. And then you can also just throw in Tyler Biotish, who was the Remington Award winner last year out of Wisconsin. So I think overall you have that depth, you have some different options there, but it's ultimately going to be center, left guard. The center spot's probably going to be decided first, and then you're going to move over to the left.
You know, the rookie Biotish, he's the intriguing guy to me. Of course, the Cowboys traded up to late 4th round to take him. As you mentioned, he won the Remington Award at Wisconsin. He had some injury issues the last couple of years, but if he is healthy, they would love to see him be able to walk in and steal that starting center spot. It's just going to be tough, again, because he hasn't had the offseason to work with. All right, right defensive end, Robert Quinn, now a Chicago Bear. So what do they do at right defensive end?
Well, it's whoever's going to stop the run the best. And I think right now you would probably throw Tyrone Crawford as that name out there, who's going to be the best run defender in 2020. Yeah, he's had the hip surgeries and he's coming back and rehabbing as well, but I still think I have more confidence, at least week one, with Tyrone Crawford at that right defensive end spot rather than maybe an Aldon Smith who hasn't played in the NFL in 5 years. Yes, he brings a lot to the table, but I don't think they're going to throw him into the fire even if he comes out and is really impressive at training camp. And then you also hopefully have Randy Gregory back. You have Bradley and I. Much like the first two positions we just talked about, there's options, and there's definitely some of those different options throughout the depth chart that are going to add some of the deeper looks to these positions. But when it comes to the starter, I think you got to go with maybe Tyrone Crawford because of his ability to stop the run.
And one of the things that makes this so intriguing is we really haven't had an opportunity to talk with the coaches to see what they think. In a normal offseason, we would have had OTAs and the mini camp. We're able to pick the brains of the coaches and try to figure out which way they're going. It's a clean slate right now as training camp gets underway here in just about a month or so from now. When we come back here on the Blitz, how about the biggest impact rookies in 2020 for the Dallas Cowboys?
Welcome back into the Blitz, the Dallas Cowboys report. And throughout the course of the offseason, we have taken some time to look at who the Cowboys could draft and who they did end up drafting. And it's only a matter of time until we get to see those players out on the field, but we get a chance to take an overview of what this draft class looked like and what it's going to mean for these rookies heading into their 2020 season.
It's impossible to know this summer, this season, or even next year how special the Cowboys class of 2020 draft picks actually are. But in this offseason of uncertainty, the 7 Dallas selections give hope to the future and could pave the way for new head coach Mike McCarthy.
Winds up down the field.
Expectations for first-round selections CeeDee Lamb are through the roof as the Oklahoma wideout adds an extra element to what was already the league's top offense from a year ago. Lamb led all non-senior wide receivers in touchdowns and receiving yards before declaring for the draft and is the first opening round receiver taken by the Cowboys since Dez Bryant in 2010. Trayvon Diggs and Reggie Robinson II each bring added size and length to the corner spot, all as a part of Mike Nolan's overhaul for the entire defensive secondary.
Sanders has the snap and drops back to pass, looking left, now throws to the left side, and it is almost intercepted, and it is intercepted. It's picked off by Robinson.
Neville Gallimore and Bradley and I aim to fulfill a similar role by immediately beefing up the defensive line. Tyler Biadasz, the 2019 Remington Award winner, could very well be the starting center or at least add outstanding depth to the interior offensive line. And then there's Ben DiNucci.
Can't tell you how excited I am to be part of the team. I'm ready to get to work. We them boys.
The fiery, confident quarterback out of James Madison that brings a modern look to the position. While all the percentages show that a majority of a draft class will not make an impact for their respective franchise, the expectations and excitement around the 2020 class of Cowboys talent is apparent. While patience is key when it comes to these prospects, it'll most likely take 3 seasons to see exactly what kind of draft Dallas had, good or bad. So until then, buckle up, get ready for some position battles in training camp, and enjoy the ride. Reporting for the Blitz, I'm Kyle Youmans.
It's important, even with all of the expectations around this rookie class, to kind of keep a good perspective on what they could bring to the table in 2020. When we come back here on the Blitz, there's one piece of information the Cowboys do need to get taken care of before training camp, and we'll talk about it coming up next on the Blitz.
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz was brought to you by AT&T. Just okay is not okay. And by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
It's the final minute of the Blitz for the 2020 offseason, and what an offseason this has been. Bill Jones with Kyle Youmans. You know, Kyle, the Cowboys have accomplished so much this offseason. I love the signing of Gerald McCoy, Don Terry Poe, Clinton Dix, the drafting of CeeDee Lamb, Trayvon Diggs, Neville Gallimore. But they got one more order of business that needs to get done by 3 o'clock on July 15th, and that would be to sign their quarterback, right?
Absolutely. It's got to be Dak Prescott from here on out because you've done such a magnificent job of building your roster, building that depth. We've talked about it all show long, all off-season long, of finally getting to the point where you can be a contender. Now you need that key to the car, that key to the sports car that's going to turn everything around, and that's Dak Prescott, a top 10 quarterback in the league, maybe even better than that, depending on who you talk to. But I think whenever it comes to his contract, we're going to go right up to that July 15th deadline. There's no reason for him to potentially sign it earlier. The best thing he could do for himself is wait. Let's just hope the Cowboys get it done.
So we're about 30 days away from that, and shortly after that, training camp will be starting at the Star in Frisco. We appreciate you joining us all off-season long for the Blitz, and we will see you at training camp 2020.